Hi there, this is Carl Irwin with another tutorial. We're going to be taking a look at a combination of software platforms here today. We're going to be looking at Qtractor, kind of a next level from our previous tutorial, but we're also going to be looking at Carla Patchbay, which is an instrument and plugin environment that is outboard from Qtractor, and that's the way that I tend to work. I have preferred using Qtractor as a MIDI sequencer that sends data out to other instrumentation or other instrumentation platforms that I can run my plugins and my instruments from. I find that to be a little bit more stable for Qtractor and less system resource intensive for Qtractor to run that way. So that's what we're going to do today, and the purposes of this tutorial is sort of to set us up for sketching something in Qtractor. That is, to put in kind of a single instrument, piano or something like that, where we can play into it, sketch out an idea, and then work with our MIDI data from there. I don't typically work that way, but a lot of people do. I prefer to work in notation. I like to work in either a condensed score or a full score in notation software. I use MuseScore for that, and I write my music in there, and then I tend to export my MIDI data from that and then do further sequencing and finessing in a digital audio workstation, where I can then mix down and render out waveform and do further mixing in that way. Sometimes, though, I will use the digital audio workstation to play directly to picture, especially if I'm writing music to a picture, to a score, to a film, rather, a film score. That can be a little bit easier to do when you're live recording, to play directly in. However, let's get started here. Let's take a look here at Qtractor. I have Qtractor opened up already. Now, I've tried to record a couple of tutorials like this already where I'm turning things on, and I find that that was very difficult. It didn't usually work out. It would usually mess up with my back-end recording, my voice recording, and my Patchbay recording of the sound. So I have things opened up already just to keep things very simple for us so that we can keep track of what we're doing. So let's take a look here. I have Qtractor opened up. It's blank. I also have Carla opened up. That is blank. I also have QJack Control started up, and I started this first. So one thing on this, when you're doing outboard instrument environments, you should start up QJack Control first. It's not that Qtractor doesn't automatically connect to the Jack server. It does do that. But when you start involving other applications, it's good to have this environment up and running already, because not everything connects to the Jack server automatically, unless it's already running. So I start this up first when I'm using Carla. Let's create a track very quickly. We're going to add a track to Carla, or rather to Qtractor. We'll just call this piano. This is going to be our sketching instrument, and we're going to make it a MIDI track. It's going to be on the master MIDI output bus. I want to change this, though. I'm going to click on this, these three little dot buttons over here, right? This menu button. You can also get to this by going to View up here and then going to Buses, but the other way is to get to it from the channel. I want to create, I want to change this. Instead of calling it master, I'm going to call this Carla 1. And I'll hit update. And I want to add a master, I want to add an audio bus to the master bus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on master, and I'm going to call this Carla return. Just one word like that. I want all of my Carla sessions to come back to this. I'm not going to hit update, I'm going to hit create. So now I have a Carla return bus and a master bus. I'm going to hit close. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Patchbay here. Once I've done all this, you want this to be on channel 1. The other stuff doesn't matter. We're not going to be using the bank select and program select. You can do that, but we're not going to be using that for our Carla instrument rack. I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to open up by hitting F8 my Patchbay in my connections Patchbay in Qtractor. A few things here. Automatically, the microphone will be attached to any bus that is existing or on or created new in a Qtractor session. That is annoying, but it also makes sense. If you're not going to be using your microphone ever, probably the best thing to do is to just turn it off from the sound card level. Just turn it off, and that way it won't be interrupting anything. However, if you are going to be recording like I am for this tutorial, you're going to have to disable your microphone in places you don't want it. I do not want this coming into my new bus that I just created, Carla Return. So I'm going to disconnect that. So I'll select both of these channels to disconnect it. I don't care if it goes anywhere else right now. I just don't want it going there. I don't want it coming into any of my Qtractor mixing. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure my Carla return bus is going to my master in, because I'm mixing down from my Carla sessions to this bus, but I want this bus to go to my master. I like to create a separate bus as a buffer between my instrument rack and my master. I don't want all of that coming into the master. It's a lot easier to make mistakes when it's all coming into the master, especially with plugins, if you're adding plugins inside of Qtractor. So I'm going to connect this to my master, left and right channel. The other thing is I do not want my Carla return coming to my system playback. I only want it coming to my master. So I'm going to disconnect this. Now, this is all happening inside of Qtractor. So when you save the file, this will retain. This will not be lost in subsequent loadings as far as the Qtractor connections are concerned. Okay, so now I have a Carla return bus coming to my master, and then my master should be going out to the system. Now I also have my master coming back up here to the Pulse Audio Jack source because I'm going to be recording what I'm doing, and I want to be able to hear that coming back. Now I have my Carla enabled up here, and you'll see that my audio is coming out to a couple of places. I don't want it coming to the system out. I want to get rid of that because I want it only coming through my Qtractor project. I want it to come through my Carla return. So I'm going to connect my left and right channels to the Carla return. So now my Carla session here is coming to Carla return. The Carla return is going to the master in. Now, the master in is then going to the system and also up here to be recorded for the tutorial. The metronome, likewise, I want that to be coming to the system as well. So I have a separate metronome in my settings, and I talked about that in the last tutorial a little bit. I want that coming out to the system so I can hear that. And I'm also going to have this come up to my Pulse Audio. Again, this is just for the tutorial purposes so that you can hear what I'm doing with the metronome. And that is the audio side. Now, the one part of this that may not be persistent is the Carla audio connection to my Carla return bus. I may find that when I load this up again that disappears. That's okay. It's only one connection. The way we're going to work is we're going to be doing most of our mixing down in Carla in subsequent tutorials. And when we're doing that, it doesn't really matter if we lose this connection. All we have to do is fire up Qtractor, fire up Carla, fire up the project files that we're using, and then make one connection here to put it all together. Okay? All the rest of the connections are going to be persistent. We just have to connect our instrument environment. MIDI, you'll notice that Carla doesn't show up over here. That's okay. We're going to find out that Carla does not show up in this until we connect it in the Patchbay from Carla's side. However, we do have our MIDI keyboard, and I'm going to connect that to my Carla out bus. This is the MIDI bus in Qtractor, so that our MIDI keyboard can control it. I'm going to connect both of these to make sure all of my controllers are connected. You may find that there's only one MIDI connection on yours, but my keyboard has a couple. Let's get out of this for a moment. Let's look at Carla. Now in Carla, let's deal with the Patchbay first. If I let me open up my side panel too, so you can see what's going on over here. You can actually drag and drop instruments. I'm going to show you that in a moment. You don't have to take all of your sound fonts and everything like that, your sound sample instruments, and load them into the plugins viewer. You can just keep them in a folder organized, and I have all of my virtual instruments, drag and drop them in. That's the best way to work without having to keep up your library, just as a side note. I'm going to go to the Patchbay, and in the Patchbay, we're in the local one right now. So this is the internal. I want to go to the external. And what I want to do is I want to connect my Qtractor Carla out bus to the Carla MIDI in bus. Then I can go back now to my internal Patchbay. If I go back to Qtractor real quick and I hit F8, you're going to see now that my Qtractor is connected to Carla. This is the other connection that may not persist. So if you find that your connections don't persist, all you need to do is connect your Carla audio out to your return bus. And from the Patchbay and Carla, connect your Qtractor to Carla, and then you're back working again. Everything else should persist between loadings. That's not so bad, really. Sometimes you'll find that it will persist. It's really buggy and unreliable, but it's a pretty small price to pay for free software that works really well. So let's go back to Carla and put this instrument together. This is the internal patch bay. We're not going to need that yet. Let's go back to the rack and let's add an instrument. And before we do that, we actually need to add something else. I'm going to go to Plugins and hit Add. And I'm going to type up here MIDI, and I want to find MIDI channel filter. Specifically, I don't want to use the MIDI channel filters that are up here. These are complicated, complex ones that have 16 points of data entry. I want to find another one that was made down here, which is a simple filter. So MIDI simple channel filter, made by this person here. I'm going to hit Add Plugin. I'm going to go to the wrench to go into the settings. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that this is set to 1 because I want to pick up all the extra control channel data from channel 1 only. If I was using channel 2, I would set it to 2 and so on and so on. Over here, I want to click this checkbox. It says Send Control Changes. This has to do with this setting. I want to be able to pick up my sustain pedal and my pitch bend and my modulation and any other controllers that I have on my MIDI keyboard. So if I click that, it'll do it. I don't typically use the send bank program changes, but what you can do is select this, and when you change a program or a bank and you automate that in Qtractor, it should update through this channel to the settings in your instrument on the other side of this filter. So if you're using that, make sure that's checked. Otherwise, that's all I need. Then I go to this other tab for parameters, and you can see how simple this is. Instead of having 16 points of entry, there's just one. I'm going to be using channel 1, which is already there by default, going out to channel 1. This will divide out my MIDI information from the MIDI input coming from my Qtractor bus and pick out only the information for channel 1 and filter that to my instrument for channel 1. Now, this should be a default thing on all instruments inside Carla, but that's not how the developer made it. Okay, so maybe down the road that will be altered, but for right now, this is what we're limited to. You have to have a filter for every instrument. Now, I know what you're thinking already. This is an awful lot to set up. Here's how you should look at that. Once you create a Carla session, what you should do is save it as a template. So if I'm always going to be using a piano for sketching, I should make a Carla piano sketching template and treat that as a compound, complex, commercial instrument, where it has my sound already loaded onto it, has my filters and effects already loaded onto it, and all I need to do is start up that Carla session and then connect it in the patch bay, and I'm ready to go. So think of it like this. We're actually building, commercial-grade instruments here with commercial-grade controls. And if you save it aside, then it's like having that. It's like building up an instrument that you would buy from a major sampling, manufacturer. So just a little tip there. Save Carla projects as templates, and then you can return to them more quickly. For example, if I was doing a string orchestration and I needed 5 string channels for 5 string sections, or more if I was doubling, I would have all of my instruments loaded in with all of my MIDI channel filters for all of the channels that I need, and then I would save that, including the reverb and effects and everything. I would save that as a template. So the next time I revisit an orchestra piece and I need to take care of the string section, I can just load up my Carla session for that string orchestra, make sure that my channels in Qtractor are appropriately labeled to the right MIDI output, and then hook it up, and I'm ready to go. Just one connection in the patch bay, and I'm ready to play back my MIDI data. So save these as templates. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an instrument. Let's go to the virtual instruments folder that I've made over the years, sound fonts, and let's grab just a piano sound. I'm going to grab this Sonatina Steinway concert piano, Concert Grand. It's a good one. And I don't need the sidebar anymore, so I'm going to get rid of the side panel. Next thing I want to do is on my instrument, I'm going to go into the settings. And again, I'm going to check Send Control Changes. Make sure it's set to channel 1. I don't want this enabled. I'm going to turn that off because I'm just going to keep the default one that's on there. Then I'm going to check everything else. I don't want my reverb on, so I'm going to turn that off. And I don't want chorus on. I'm going to turn that off as well. I'm going to be using my own reverb and filters inside of Carla. So we have everything set. Now what we need to do is we need to connect this. So if we go to the patch bay, we'll see that we have MIDI input. I want that to go to the filter. All of my filters will come, all of my event outs will go to my filters. Okay, filter 1, filter 2, whatever, if I have for whatever channels. And I could label this later channel 1, right, if I had multiple ones. Then I want this to go to my instrument, and then I want this to go to my audio out. But before I do that, let's add a reverb very quickly. So I'm going to go to Plugin, click on Add, type in Reverb, and calf reverb, we'll use that one. I'll go back to my Patchbay. I'm going to connect my reverb, left and right, and then I'm going to take this to the audio out. Now this should go to Carla's audio out, and this is going to come back to Qtractor. So if I go back to the rack, and I can change this any way I want. Let's say I take down the dry a little bit, turn up the wet, maybe turn up the decay time. We'll make this hall enormously, absurdly big. Turn up my pre-delay to 20, like it's sitting back on the stage quite a way, just to demonstrate it. Close that out. Now, let's go make sure that our settings in Qtractor are good, but otherwise this is all set. I have my channel filter, which I can minimize, my instrument, and my effects that I'm sending out. Let's go back to Qtractor. We'll open up the Patchbay just to make sure everything's working. My MIDI is all correct. My audio should be correct. I have Carla coming to my Carla return bus. I have my Carla return coming to my master. I'm sending my master out right now to my Pulse Audio jack, so hopefully you can hear it, and also to my system so I can hear it. And my metronome is going to both places as well. And it looks like everything is good to go. Let's open up the mixer. I want to make sure that my output here are set to monitor. Otherwise, I won't hear my instrument. So I'm turning on my Carla return monitor, also the master out. Now, if I play on my keyboard, I should hear sound, and so should you. Okay, so that should be coming back right now to my through the Patchbay to you to hear, just to make sure. So we have everything connected as it should be. Let's do a little bit of recording here, just for demonstration purposes. We'll close this out. And what we want to do is we just want to arm this to record. We'll set the system to record. We will save this very quickly as sketch test. We're good to go. So I'll turn on my metronome so we can hear that. And we'll hit play to record. Just a simple chord progression there. And you can see not everything lines up. That's okay. You can go back and change it. That's the benefit of using a digital audio workstation, is that you can move things around. One thing about that is it's not necessarily great to quantize everything. You may want to leave it, real. That's one of the nice things about playing directly into a digital audio workstation, is that you can give a real performance. I'm going to bring this back here. By the way, shift-click to move the cursor in any view. If I hit spacebar, we should hear this come back. And I can, actually, before we do that, let's kill that annoying click that we don't need anymore. And we hit spacebar to play. And it plays back. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that the notes have gaps, even though you hear the sustain pedal working. So Qtractor records sustain pedal information as separate information. It's not like some other digital audio workstations where sustain pedal will actually affect the note length in the way it's being recorded. This is nice, and it's also not so nice. It's nice in the fact that it's nice to have things separated in case you want to use data separately. It's not so nice because it means that you have it separated, and when you go to copy MIDI data, you have to make sure you have all the data copied, or else it won't play back exactly the same in your copy. So I highly recommend, once you get past the sketching phase, that you play back in directly one instrument at a time, not using a sustain pedal, and actually holding keys down, playing legato as the case may be, one note to the next from the keyboard, so that you're recording that data the way you want. Otherwise, you would have to go in and either make sure that the pedal data is connected, or you would have to drag each one of these note values out to where you want them to be. Either way, okay? But just a little tip there. As far as the sustain pedal goes for me, it is nice in that I don't really care about the way it's recorded because, like I said, I come from notation. And if I am playing a keyboard instrument in live and doing some live scoring, that pedal data is going to be connected just to that instrument anyway. So it's not really going to be an issue for me. And it's nice to just be able to play in and play the way a real instrument would play, whether or not that information is separated. Bouncing out very quickly. So once you've done this, if you want to bounce this out, and I think we covered this a little bit last time, what you want to do is you want to create another track. So we're going to come up here and hit Add Track. Now, this will be an audio track, not a MIDI track, and we want it to record from the master. We'll call this Mix Down. We have to do this because our instruments are outboarded. They are not in Qtractor. Now, if our instruments were in Qtractor, Qtractor has a mix down feature where it will mix not in real time, and it will just mix everything out and play back those instrument plugins. Because we're outboarded to Carla, we actually have to play back the session as much as our processor will allow us to. We have to render down and mix down or bounce out. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Okay. We'll go back to the mixer, and what I want to do is on my mix down, I'm going to take the fader and move it all the way to the bottom. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it does avoid the potential for any looping that could occur. It shouldn't happen, but it might happen. You don't want any looping coming through the master out to the mix down, back to the master again. So I just take that fader, drop it all the way down, and I, keep that possibility impossible. All right. Now we want to arm this. So I'm going to hit Record on the mix down, and we'll move this back here to record. And you don't have to record all the silence or whatever. You can bounce out from anywhere. And then we'll arm the system to record. And now what I do when I hit playback, it should record this in real time to a new track. This is a good sign. We see the sound coming through here. It's not picking up my voice. I don't have my microphone attached to this. With effects and everything that's in Carla is playing back. And we'll wait until this is empty out here before we stop it. Okay, so now if we have this track saved, we can see what the name of it is by hovering. This is going to be Mixdown 1, and that's where I would go to in my project folder. I could take this file and I could edit that separately from Qtractor if I wanted to, if this was the final one to be mastered. If I right-click on this, I have some capabilities to edit the clip in various ways. Split it, normalize it, crossfade it, and do whatever. I can create loops. I can also normalize. If I normalize, it will expand this out to the fullest amount. Now, if I want to hear this back, let's say I solo the track. I need to go back to my mixer very quickly. I would need to enable the fader on this, bring it up so I would hear it out the master. So now, if I hit play with it soloed, what I'm hearing is just the sound of my recorded audio. And you can see that it's identical to what I played. So that is bouncing out from an outboard instrument environment. So just to recap a few things. Make sure you make your connections in Qtractor and Carla. There's one connection that has to be made in Qtractor for the audio bus. Carla coming into the audio bus, return bus. And then there's one connection in the Patchbay of Carla that has to be made for the MIDI. And if you don't have persistence in subsequent bootings of your project, those are the only connections you have to make. So as many Carla sessions as you have open for that project, you would have to make those. That's really no big deal. We are going to be mixing down inside of Carla into Patchbay sort of setup here with effects and MIDI filters. And because we're doing that, this is a lot like using LMMS as an instrument environment and doing all of your mixing in there. So we can mix down to a single audio output from that Carla session with stereo capability and everything, and bring that back into Qtractor. Save your Carla sessions as templates. So if you're going to be using this instrument, the Steinway Concert Grand, as a solo instrument in one channel, save this Carla session out and save that for later use. Make a bus for it when you open up the project, load up this Carla session and connect it, and you're good to go. And all the other settings will all be persistent inside of here. So that gets around having to make all these connections over and over again. You could also make a Carla template that just has 16 simple channel filters in it. So you can see here I can actually rename this. If I rename this to MIDI, say MIDI 1, this would be my filter for MIDI channel 1. I could make another one of these for MIDI 2 and make sure that I set my settings in here to be for channel 2 in and out, and so on. I could have 16 of these set for every Carla session that I save, and then I can add up to 16 instruments that would be segregated from each other through that filter from my Qtractor project. So again, save your Carla sessions as templates. You're really building a complex commercial grade instrument when you do that, that you can just reload and have in the future. Good luck with all of this, and I wish you happy mixing.